Okay, right. So I'm going to talk you through this AO2 essay. How far could the historian make use of sources 1 and 2 together to investigate the national crisis of self-confidence in the USA in the 1970s? With these questions, two really important points to highlight out the question, first of all. First of all, how could you make use of the sources together? When we did the last assignment, and an important point to note is that we want to avoid looking at the sources in complete isolation, i.e. doing paragraphs on source 1 and then paragraphs on source 2. We need to think of them as a pair. The second point to highlight from this question is what it's about. It's about the national crisis of self-confidence. So first job is to find bits in the source that are relevant to this idea of a national crisis of self-confidence. So you need to highlight that. That's our focus. That's the question we are answering. So when we get on to paragraph 1, remember we're under time conditions in the exam. We may not have time for an introduction, so we want to launch straight into the content. We're going to ignore who said it, when they said it, why they said it for the time being. We are only going to look at the content of the sources to begin with. So if we have a look at this first source and what kind of issues it's raising about why America might have had a national crisis of self-confidence. And I think, well, I'm going to give you a clue. One of them is very much about foreign policy. So we want to find perhaps two aspects in this source that are telling us why America has got a national crisis of self-confidence. Okay, you should be able to find two in this source. And then we're going to have a look at the content of the next source. So I scroll down. Again, we're going to ignore who said it, when they said it, why they said it. And we're once again just going to look at the content. And we're going to see, does it raise any other issues? Does it reinforce the issues that are raised in the first source, or does it come up with some further issues about why America might have had a national crisis of self-confidence? And then just think, the content of the two of them together, do they give you, are they useful? Do they give you a range of reasons why America might have been feeling a bit down in this period, basically, which is what it's about, this national crisis of self-confidence. So that is paragraph 1, just looking at content. Our second paragraph, we are going to be looking at context. So we are thinking about when these two sources were written and how that might affect the way they were written and their usefulness. So if we scroll back up to the top one, we can see this is President Ford's address in 1975. So think about, what's been going on in the lead up to 1975, which would have created this national crisis of self-confidence, and perhaps explain the tone of the way he's addressing his speech. And then we've got a later one, 5 years later in 1980. Now have a think, do you think that increases the usefulness of the sources, the fact they are 5 years apart? Or do you think it decreases their usefulness? What does it suggest about the national crisis of self-confidence? Does it suggest it's a very short-term issue? Or is it suggesting that it's a much wider, a longer period problem in American politics, in America at the time? So I'm just going to try and extend out this box. Oh, no, I can't. So never mind. Let's just go back up to the top then. So paragraph 1, content. Paragraph 2, context, when they're written. Paragraph 3, we're going to look at who said them, why they said them, and where. It may be relevant where they said them. Definitely, you're going to have to think about on this one. We need to think of this as a kind of pick and mix. We want to pick the relevant bits. And I think for these two, there we go, we can see both of them now. It's definitely going to be relevant who has said them and why they're saying them. They are both presidential, they're either presidents or they are presidential candidates. So how might that affect the way that they are making these statements? And then again, keep coming back to this issue of, does it increase their usefulness or decrease their usefulness? And you need to keep coming back to that idea. Does it increase use or decrease use, these points? And then finally, once we've done content, we've done context in paragraph 2, we've done provenance in paragraph 3, we're going to come to a conclusion. And our conclusion is where we kind of sum up what are the key strengths of these two sources, if we want to find out about a national crisis of self-confidence, and what are the key weaknesses. So a key strength might be the content, and you have to explain why. A key weakness might be who is saying them, and again you'd have to explain why. And we want to avoid, well, there are a few things we want to avoid. We want to avoid saying one source is more useful than the other, because remember, we're thinking of them as a pair. We also want to avoid some of our generalized statements. It's not useful because it's biased. That word, remember, is banned. We need to justify all of our statements with and pack it full of evidence, and then we'll have a really good conclusion.